Welcome to PRAJNA SPARKS Contemplation interlude, where Yeshe and Zopa discuss the previous full episode. Please take a moment to like, follow, and review us. Aside from your own practice, this is the best possible offering as it helps us reach new listeners. So we are here talking about emptiness and non-self. Just a small little topic.
Yeah, and we'll get through this in no time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, as I'm sure most of you listening all know, emptiness and non-self is such a huge, vast topic. And in fact, we thought that one of the things that we could begin with is just pointing out, because it bears mentioning, that these hallmarks of the Buddhist teachings, while they may seem straightforward, they're far from simple, and there's such depth to them that we can gain some overall understanding of them. But we really encourage all of you to delve further into them, because these are central to the Buddhist teachings. They're central to the Buddhist understanding of reality, really.
Yes, and the important thing there is that the Buddha didn't spend a lot of time teaching about things that weren't relevant for the fruition that his path of practice cultivates. What is that? Nirvana, in the forms of liberation from samsara of the arhat, the bodhisattva's dynamic nirvana that allows for voluntary rebirth into samsara for the sake of other beings, and Buddhahood. The fruits of the Buddha's path are always freedom. They're always about freedom from dukkha, the characteristic of samsara, cyclic existence. And those fruits are described as nirvana generally, and that can be the nirvana of the arhat, or it could be Buddhahood, the complete and perfect enlightenment of manifesting one's true nature of mind. But it's not just that it's important to look at the hallmarks because the Buddha says so. The reason he says so, the reason he spends so much time on non-self and emptiness, is because they are crucial to uprooting that source of samsara, to overturning the entire architecture of samsara and revealing that its very essence is nirvana. These four seals relate to marks of existence. In fact, in other Buddhist traditions, they may be called the three marks of existence, and those encompass the first three seals, with nirvana as peace being a separate category.
One thing that we often hear from people on all different stages of the path is just this sense of emptiness as being a denial of our experience, that somehow it contradicts all of these myriad appearances, sights, sounds, smells, all of these things that we experience in our life, and almost as if there's this understanding of emptiness as being something out there, some hidden reality that's beyond. Whereas so much of emptiness is pointing to the fact that everything we're experiencing is emptiness. In fact, the only reason we can experience is because of emptiness. Of course, to get into this, it takes a little bit of analysis, a lot of listening, a lot of contemplation, and a lot of meditation, as well as a fair amount of study. But it's well worth it. But we thought that one of the things we could explore a little bit right now is just the sense of how emptiness isn't nothingness.
Yes, that is so important because it sounds like it's talking about nothingness as we explored in the Dharma talk, but that's really not the case, as you mentioned. This is also a really prominent topic in Buddhist philosophy, where the middle way means many things. But one of the ways that we walk that middle way is by avoiding what are called the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. So emptiness and non-self are really about that. And often people think emptiness means nihilism. I recently read an article by a noted academician of Buddhism that said something along the lines of, without a self to reborn, there's nothing out there in the cosmos. That really misapprehends emptiness and non-self as the Buddha teaches it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because we have such a habit of fixating on things as they appear or our initial understanding that we can often sway back and forth between these extremes of eternalism and nihilism. Nihilism being the sense that it's only what we can see, hear, taste, touch, think about, just as they appear to us, that is real, and nothing else. That's it. So that when we die, that's it. There's nothing that could possibly continue. Eternalism, on the other hand, is just the sense that, oh, there is some real thing, a soul, a self, an Atman, or just me, that continues, that lasts, that goes from life to life, like an actor changing clothes between lives, taking on different roles, but fundamentally being the same. And this really is the beauty, the intricacy of the Buddhist path, that it falls into neither of these extremes. It threads the path between thinking that it's only what we perceive and nothing else that is real, and that things are real just as they appear to us. Or the other extreme of thinking, oh yeah, there's something nebulous out there. There's a self, a me, that I can't quite comprehend, that I can't quite identify or pinpoint, but that must be there, that lasts, that is unchanging.
Exactly. So, like many things with the Buddha's incredibly intricate teachings, it's quite the opposite of what we think. We think that non-self is nihilism. Actually, it's the belief in a truly existent self, which non-self contradicts, that is entirely incorrect. On the one hand, there is the premise, oh, we have this experience, an intuitive experience that, little creatures like ants might have, infants who are human and cannot yet speak. They also behave in ways we can see that are about protecting themselves, having what's mine, pushing away what isn't, not caring about the rest. And so we think, oh, that self must be real in this way that means that it lasts. It somehow permeates our entire life, even though when we look and investigate, it's very clear that we're constantly changing. Our body's constantly changing. The cells are changing. There's movement happening. Our thoughts, our ideas, our concepts hopefully are changing over the course of a lifetime and so forth. And yet, that's completely opposite to what we think of as this self, this I, this me, this monolithic experience that is immune to everything. It's kind of like this cloud that encompasses us, and then all kinds of little changes happen within that, but that cloud stays the same. That is eternalism, and it doesn't work. If the self existed that way, it could not interact. It would have no way to change. And relationship is change. Anytime we enter into relationship with another human, another being, even a thing, there is an impact on us. And we have that experience all the time. Basically, we're carrying around this cognitive dissonance all the time of I am this self that's completely different than how my experience works out. And then when we have comments like, oh, no self means that there's nothing to be reborn, so there's nothing in the world, that's a misapprehension that is often followed by, well, if there is no self, or what I think is that at the end of this life, that's it. It's all over. We just fall into a black hole of nothingness. That's nihilism. These are the two extremes that we navigate through this practice of understanding the teachings on non-self and emptiness. Different Buddhist traditions will address these, interpret these in different ways. But the point here is to be less intellectual about it, to be less academic about it, and to be a lot more experiential about it. Drop into our experience and see what matches or doesn't match the teachings. Challenge ourselves as we challenge the teachings and vice versa, and allow the Dharma to change us.
Exactly. That's so spot on. Because we think that non-self emptiness is something that maybe we'll get to. Maybe we'll find it out somewhere. Actually, non-self emptiness is our experience. What we're experiencing right now is the experience of non-self. And it doesn't negate our experience of the world, of our thoughts, our emotions, our feelings. But what it is pointing out is that this moment, right here, right now, as you're listening to this podcast, that is an experience of non-self. How amazing. How amazing that we take this basic assumption. We experience the richness of life, of our emotions, of our feelings, of the world, of our relationships, of what we are. And we immediately assume I, mine. But if we can just question a little bit, what in here is the self? What is me? What is mine? It's not saying that your experience is wrong. Just look at those assumptions around it.
And that brings me to another point that is often confused, because the Buddha isn't saying that you don't exist at all. Non-self does not mean that you have absolutely no existence. You're a figment of your own imagination and some kind of solipsistic constant. You do have an existence. Your existence as an individual is definitely a very diverse one, a dynamic one. We are constantly using the label I or me, mine, your, etc., on a perpetually changing set of things. In the case of I, the body-mind complex that I think of as me is in perpetual flux, like a kaleidoscope on steroids. And yet I am always calling all of that I. And I'm treating it as though it were static, as though it were impervious to influence from beyond this me, as though it was this monolithic entity that transcends time and space and relationship. Non-self means so much more. It means that, yes, we have this conventional existence with our identity, our personality, our histories, etc. And it's not that we're transcending. What we're transcending is the misperception of that, the taking that grandness and making it small, making it no more than that, and ignoring all of the reality of interconnection with all beings, all of the reality of our multiplicity, our embeddedness in reality in general, and instead thinking of us as an actor upon the world or a recipient of actions from the world. It's a really complicated thing. Philosophy has a way of twisting our minds up. And there's a famous saying in Tibetan Buddhism, which I particularly love to repeat in moments like this, that says, the teachings on emptiness are hard to listen to, but easy to practice. Whereas the teachings on compassion and bodhicitta are very easy to listen to, very pleasant, warm feeling and cozy, but very hard to practice. And I find that this is the case.
I think so too. I love this aspect of how emptiness, non-self, as Yeshe was just describing, points to actually how we are upheld and upholding in all of our interactions. In some ways, it's so easy to see this And yet there's this tendency towards wanting to be in control, towards wanting to be impervious, when this teaching on the reality of emptiness, of non-self, points to this beautiful interdynamic web of life, of interdependence that's happening all the time, that helps us stretch beyond our limited concept of ourself and recognize the beautiful whole responsibility that we have for ourselves and all being.
Yes, it really is an important thing to recognize that emptiness is not over there and compassion over here, for example. In our tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, the Karma Kagyu lineage, emptiness is described as embraced by compassion and vice versa. It's emptiness, compassion in a mutual embrace. This is non-self. And the 4 hallmarks of the Buddha's teachings sequentially bring us there. The teachings on impermanence start to help us to perceive how even experiences that we consider pleasant or neutral have a character of dissatisfaction to them, lack of fulfillment to them, kind of dukkha. Then when we explore dukkha more, that gets us to an understanding of non-self. We don't think of the self as something that flits in and out and disappears and is random. It's permanent. Our experience through the practice shows us the impermanence of all these things that we premise the idea of self upon. We also don't think of the self as this miserable little entity. As a matter of fact, when we're unhappy about things, it implies that we think there's a state of contentment that is our birthright, and that suffering contradicts it. And you know what? We're right. That is the case. But the idea of a truly existent self is at loggerheads with that. The beauty of the Buddha's teachings is that any given part of any of the Buddha's teachings, not just these 4 hallmarks, contains within it the imprint, the blueprint for all of the Buddha's teachings. I like to describe it as like holographic film, where any little piece of the film can reconstruct the entire hologram. If we encounter the teachings in that way, that is definitely what will happen. And with the 4 hallmarks, we see that even more clearly. Another metaphor that comes to mind are those beautiful little dolls that are nested one in another. And these 4 hallmarks are like that. We have what seems to be one big thing, impermanence. When we open our hearts to those teachings, we are led into dukkha. And we open that up, and there's yet another one inside, non-self. And when we penetrate to that, let our hearts be seared. Let our hearts open to non-self in all its complexity, multiplicity, and wonder. What we find is that nirvana is peace.
Join us on the new moon for our next full episode. We can't thank you enough for taking the time to like, follow, share, and review PRAJNA SPARKS. It means a lot to us. If you have any questions, contact us via email, Instagram, or Facebook. Check the episode notes for those links and for more resources on today's topic. Visit us on the web at prajnafire.com or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at PRAJNA SPARKS. Thank you for listening. May all beings benefit.